Hello. Welcome back to Ladies Who Create, a show where we'll be interviewing the incredibly inspiring women who are trailblazing the design and creative industries. I'm your co-host, Jess Rosenberg, and I'm a creative director currently working in the tech industry.
And I'm your other co-host, Liz Meyer, a creative director and one half of the Data Lands duo. And in this episode, we're joined by the talented ladies who make up the agency taking the design world by storm, Goodside, Jessica Strelioff and Danielle LaRoy.
After years working in-house and agency side, Danielle and Jessica teamed up to create a new kind of studio. One part visual, one part verbal, brought together to build full-of-life brands that make the world a bit brighter. Welcome, Jessica and Danielle. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us. We're super excited to have you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're so happy to be here.
I know we have a few questions planned, and maybe we can start with pre-Goodside, what your individual journeys up to co-founding Goodside looked like. You both had really impressive careers before founding the studio together, so I would love to hear just a little bit more about your paths that you both took and the paths that led you to where you currently are.
Yeah, we had we had pretty parallel paths, which is kind of nice because it gave Jess and I a shared foundation of sort of how we think about brands and how we think about the work we do. I, right out of school, went and worked at Dropbox. This was like back in its kind of stick figure era, so way back in the day. I was on their marketing team, loved it, sort of followed the creative work that was happening onto the agency side. And right around 2017, joined a hybrid interactive brand studio called Upper Quad. That's where Jess and I met. And worked there as a strategist for a couple of years. The time at Dropbox, I think, kind of taught me how to, like, from the inside scale a brand, and then working on the agency side, I discovered how brands are actually built. Jess and I worked together then for a couple of years before she left and went independent, and I pretty quickly after that followed. And we worked together independently for a couple of years, sort of trying all different kinds of models, and then founded Goodside about almost a year ago today.
And while Danielle was at Dropbox, I was at Asana. So we had sort of a shared startup, hyper growth stage startup. So I was there, helped lead a rebrand there internally. That was like my first sort of in-house experience of leading a rebrand, which was really exciting and fun to see. Before that, I had experience working in-house at Yahoo. So I was doing like product design, and like right out of school before that, I was working at a studio called Farm Design, which is a really small brand studio in Pasadena, California, which is close to where I grew up. So that was my first job out of school. And that was actually a really great experience because I was doing like all the things that you think you're going to do when you go to design school. Like I was like designing coffee packaging and restaurant branding and editorial layouts and all this stuff. And that was really awesome. And during that time, I was also working really closely with the founder of the studio. And so that was a really nice sort of like business side deep dive of, you know, how to run a creative business. So that was really nice. But yeah, Danielle and I, we both had that shared in-house experience, which was really helpful. And then when we met at Upper Quad, it was like, oh my gosh, we just like speak the same language. We get each other, you know, like you have those sort of colleagues where you meet up and you're just like, oh yeah, immediately clicking, like you immediately, you know, work wife and all that fun stuff. So it was really awesome.
Yeah, those relationships are so special and really stay with you for the rest of your life. So since both leaving in-house world, other full-time jobs, how did you two start working together on your own? What did that look like?
I basically bribed Danielle to work with me on as many projects as I could until I convinced her to go independent. Kind of joking, but kind of serious. So I left probably a year or two before you went completely independent, Danielle. And I had just like, you know, I was a creative director at Upper Quad. And so I was like kind of in meetings all the time. I was kind of feeling a little bit burnout creatively and like missed working, doing the hands-on work, missed working directly with like founders of smaller companies. We were at Epicquad, we were working with a lot of like the big companies in the world, which was really a great experience. But I really loved working with smaller early stage companies that needed a brand built from the ground up. So I left to freelance full time and just like work directly with founders. I had some freelance projects lined up, and made the jump and just started doing it. I was like, I'll try this for like 3 months, see how it goes. If I hate it, I can always get another full-time job at an agency or in-house or, try something else. And then I loved it. And I loved it so much. I kept telling Danielle that over and over again. And then I would just like, I started hiring her for just like small little things. Like, I'm like, hey, they need like some brand strategy help. Like, can you just like come on for a little bit, like behind the scenes? You don't have to like meet with them or anything. And then that evolved into bigger and bigger scale collaborations. And then Danielle, you left in 2020. Yeah.
Yeah. I left in 2020, basically a couple of years of Jess saying, come work with me. It's amazing. We get to work directly with founders. And I think once you had left, I realized how special it is to work with someone who kind of understands the strategy side of the world. I think what's unique about Jess and I is like, I work on the strategy side, obviously, and she's on the visual side. And sort of having that shared language is kind of rare between designers and strategists or designers and copywriters. And I think we're both able to speak that kind of strategy language, which I just discovered over time was like actually quite rare, and wasn't just the usual kind of creative strategist dynamic.
Now that you've been working together for a bit as Goodside, how has it been? Has it morphed over time? Have your roles evolved and grown together?
Totally. Yeah, I feel like we're experimenting constantly. Every single project that we take on, we're trying something just a little bit differently. And even before we officially formed Goodside, we had tried working together at like every different capacity, which I know Danielle lightly touched on, but it's like we worked, like where I would bring her on, we worked where she would bring me on. We bid on projects together as independent freelancers. We even like embedded into larger agencies where we worked as sort of like a brand duo team. So we experimented with like all different ways of working. And so we went into forming Goodside with a really great understanding of what worked well and what didn't work well. But even with that, like every client and project and goals and timelines and scope and everything is just so different. So we're always shifting the way that we work quite a bit. Which is fun.
But
it keeps it exciting and fresh.
Great.
No, that's awesome. I have a similar situation. I'm in a duo as well, and every project is completely new. You meet these clients and then you build these relationships with them, and you have to kind of morph who you are depending on who the client is. Yeah, it's a hard dynamic when you're like a 2-person team and then every project is a little different and everything has to change slightly for each client. When you have an agency client versus an in-house client, do you feel like it's wildly different dynamic?
Oh, definitely. We actually just worked with an agency, and it's much more like we sort of morph to their working style, like more so. We don't work with agencies, I would say, all that much. There's sort of one that we work with quite a bit. I would say the majority of our projects are directly with companies or like sort of in-house teams. But I would say when we are working with agency clients, it's definitely more like we morph to their workflow and their sort of like team dynamic and structure and how they want to run the process. And we sort of more come in as like brand experts. But everything else is sort of dictated by them and sort of their relationship with the client. So in some ways it's like less stressful. In some ways it's more stressful because we don't have that really tight dynamic with the client and like trust with the client. But yeah, I don't know. Anything to add, Danielle? I'm trying there's other things I'm missing there.
We try not to morph too much like who we are at our core. I think, one of the tempting things when we started Goodside was to take whatever projects came our way. And I think what we have been trying to do and be really conscious of is like taking projects that actually make sense for the two of us, projects that really prioritize having a strategy set before getting into visual and verbal identity. I think a lot of folks, especially in the beginning, were reaching out with like visual only projects or verbal only projects,
or websites,
yeah, exactly, or websites. And I think one of the things that we have continued to try and be conscious of is like saying yes to only projects that are really right for us and true to who we are and who we want to be. And that has sort of become like a flywheel, which has been really nice. So over time, we've gotten definitely like projects that fit us better. But in the beginning, it was definitely hard not to just like sort of chameleon our way into like saying yes to every project that we could, because that's always tempting.
Totally. I'm super curious, when you get requests for, say, visual rebrands, how much educating do you both have to do around your process, especially around the strategy piece? Because that's such a core piece of that sort of initiative. Do you find yourselves having to educate prospective clients on the importance of that phase and that sort of project?
Always. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
It is so common. Yeah. And not for any good reason. I think truthfully, like the word strategy is so everything and nothing. It's kind of hard to explain what we mean by strategy because everybody has their own, different definition. And so that's kind of the first component is like explaining to clients what we mean when we say, we set the strategy first. And really that's like establishing your reason for being, your kind of unique point of view and laying out this like foundation. And so, yeah, I would say that like a lot, maybe most of our client conversations in our first new business call are about like setting that understanding, that shared kind of language of what is strategy and why does it matter. And I think once you lay it out as like, we're going to shape your story and make sure that when you ask your product team, your sales team, your, engineers, what is it that we're doing here? Everybody kind of has a common understanding and, vernacular for what it is that we're doing here. And then we kind of build on top of that with visual and verbal identity that brings that all to life.
And I would say it's rare once we explain that people are like, oh, we don't need that. Like, they're like, that's like, people are like, oh yeah, we do. We actually do need that. But a lot of the times if, we have a form on our website, intake form on our website for people to reach out about projects, inquiries. And a lot of the time they don't check that they need brand positioning or brand because they just don't understand quite what it is. But once we say that, they're like, oh yeah, we definitely need that and understand that's an important part of just like a new logo. So
that's great. You're able to like educate and show the importance and value of that work and that step in the process.
Yeah, I think like coming in as experts and just leading the charge and figuring out what the brand is supposed to be doing and what are we doing here, kind of conversation that a lot of people aren't having. Yeah, I think it's really important when you're rebranding, definitely. So that's awesome that you are able to educate them in that way to explain like, hey, we need to do this. It's cool.
Yeah. When I think back to my in-house days, that was one of the things that I didn't really understand. We were sort of missing or was in flux. There was that was very much, being in a hypergrowth stage, there was sort of a lot of different, like spaghetti on the wall. We'll just try a bunch of things and see what sticks as far as positioning goes. And it does create kind of like internal friction. And I didn't know that was a positioning problem at the time. But then once we locked into it, once there was like an all hands and we set our strategy and everyone kind of could get on the same page, that's when that was like my first experience understanding that like, oh, wow, brand positioning and strategy matters so much, both like externally, of course, but also internally for the teams that are, for the team that's working on this all together.
I had a question. Off of your website, you're speaking about these dream briefs that you're interested in. What is this? Has it been working? Yeah. Very curious to know, because I would love to put it out there, like some of the dream things that I'd love to do, but I feel like that's too scary in a way.
It's finest. And published on your site too. It's amazing.
Yeah.
You're like visually manifesting the project you want and which types, which I think is so cool. So yeah, I would love to hear more about how that's going and what it is too for those listening.
I mean, I swear it works. We have had, to answer your first question, like we have had projects that are on that list of dream briefs just like come to us, not necessarily even because they read that article, but just I think we put it out in the world and we're very clear about what we're excited about, and we talk a lot about it and we share it publicly. But yeah, I mean, I think Danielle and I were just like brainstorming dream projects when we first started Goodside. We're actually writing another dream brief part 2 post coming out soon with more project ideas. But we're just like, what do we want Goodside to work on? Like, what are we excited about? What do we want to see in our portfolio? What companies do we want to help with branding? So we sat down and just like started creating a list. And yeah, a lot of people have reached out to us about that, both like creatives, but also potential clients who just like seem to really be excited about it. So we're going to keep doing it. So I think every year.
Awesome. So you mentioned that some projects that we're on, there's some types of projects or maybe some brands or companies that you're manifesting have come to you. So there is something about putting your intentions out into the world and actually seeing them manifest.
Totally. I don't know if you read The Secret. Like I read the book like 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
But I swear there's something to it. Like putting it out into the world. It helps you attract what you want.
Yeah. Like vision boarding too. Is that part of your process too?
I have a vision board as my desktop background.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Like more personal, but yeah.
Yeah. Maybe I should try that. I see every Pinterest idea, every like fun, you got to make your own luck kind of stuff. And I'm like, but is it going to work? I'll just focus on working it out, like versus dreaming about things. So yeah, maybe this is my moment to be inspired.
Yeah, I think it's like the act of creating is more, at least how I feel about it, is like the act of creating it is the more important part, because then you're just like able to articulate more clearly what you want and really understand that versus like, I mean, I don't even really look at the vision board that's on my desktop that much. Like it's not that final output, but it was like the process of actually sitting down, giving myself a few hours to create that and really think about intentionally, where I want to take my day to day. That was the most helpful process. Actually, Grace Walker, part of what inspired that was Grace Walker shared with me Life Compass. Is that what it's called? Year Compass. Have you heard of this? It's like a workbook that asks you a lot of like really thought-provoking questions at the start of the year, a new year. And I'd never done that before. I was like, I don't know. Like, I'm not really like super into New Year's resolutions necessarily, but it's a free workbook. Like, I think it's yearcompass.com or something like that. I filled it out and then that inspired the vision board. And it was like a really nice process. And we did something similar for Goodside too. Like Danielle and I at the beginning of every year, we'll sit down and like do a company version and also personal one.
I love that.
Okay. I'm going to go buy that.
It's free.
It's nice. That manifesting blog post that we wrote of all of the project, our dream briefs, was like a fun exercise because we got to say, okay, what are the industries that we're interested in? What are like the types of, I don't know, folks within those industries that we would be excited about? And we haven't we found that I think people can see themselves in like the different elements. So even if clients, don't fit perfectly into, the company that we described being a dream brief, like they'll see themselves in like the healthcare piece of the puzzle or like the pet food piece of the puzzle. And they're like, we're not doing exactly that, but here's what we're doing. Here's our unique point of view. What do you think? And are you interested? And so I
That's
think
really cool.
we always talk about that as like one of our green flags is like when a client comes and they know who we are or have a reason for kind of reaching out, either it's like, we really like your approach or we love the work you did for this company previously. That's always like a major green flag for us because I think those clients understand us and want to work with us. And likewise, it's always client relationships are a two-way street. It's not just, we don't just need to like them, they need to like us too.
Oh, for sure. And I love some of the adjectives you have on that page too. It's like you're really specific about the types of brands, but then you have rebellious and craftspeople and smile. And so you get a very clear signal for the type of work you love doing. So let's say it's a brand that's not any of the ones you list here, but they are rebellious and they care about craft and they're vibing with your mood boards and the past projects that you've done. Like that gives a really strong signal as well into the type
Totally.
of work and humans that you are. Super curious, since you mentioned green flags, this is a spicier question, but what are some yellow or like red flags that you've come across with potential clients, if you're comfortable talking about it?
Really, Jess is really good at sniffing out red flags. Like we'll hear a comment and be like, ooh, I think they're not ready for this exercise, or like she's kind of like attuned to the client in a way that I find really impressive.
I think Danielle is the more optimistic of us, and I'm the more maybe slightly pessimistic, and so that might be like I come in. But I think I'm making sure that it's like the right time for the company. So like making sure that they have the right people in place, which typically means that there's someone that has enough bandwidth to manage a brand project internally, even if they're not necessarily the one that's the final decision maker. It could be like a marketer that's making sure that like everyone can give consolidated feedback, or like someone that helps with scheduling and managing, the client side of the team. So that's like one thing we look for. If anyone is ever like bad mouthing past experience with working with a creative, that's like a definite yellow, maybe red flag. I will ask more questions before I immediately jump to like a red flag with that one. Because it could have just been like not a right fit, but you're coming out the gate with like, oh, we had a really bad experience with like 3 creatives that we worked with in the past. I'm like, okay, that might be like more of a you situation. I think if they're really trying to talk us down on pricing, like pricing is always should feel really collaborative. Scoping and pricing should feel like a two-way conversation for sure. But if they're like really trying to nickel and dime us and like it's a lot of back and forth in that phase, it kind of gives that taste in our mouth. Like, yeah.
I think timing is another one where it's like, if we, I think it does come down to like respect for the craft and our time. And green flag is like clients that are willing to wait, because usually we're booked up like a month or 2 in advance. And so folks that are willing to wait for us are like, we really appreciate that. The flip side of that is folks that are like, can we cut a week here? Can we cut a week there?
Well, why can't you start
and
tomorrow?
Just for the sake of cutting,
like we just
sometimes
can't.
Like I think we get folks where we're like, okay, what is the time pressure here? And they're just like, well, we just need to move fast. In an arbitrary sense.
Sometimes people just need a logo. Sometimes that's just all they need. Maybe they have a whole bunch of VC pitches coming up and they just need a logo and they just need a nice little like pitch deck, and then that's it. And then later on they need the full brand.
Totally.
But figuring out those personality types and business types, also what stage are they in? We get that stuff a lot as well. There's a lot of pre-seed companies that they think very big and they want all of the things, but they don't have their strategy, their brand even settled in their own mind. So yeah, it's an interesting challenge to come across when you're first intaking a client. So I commend you on saying no to certain people. It's hard. I think it's hard to do.
It is. I mean, we have a forcing function. We're just small. We are only 2 people. We intentionally are creating lifestyles that are sustainable and not creating burnout for either of us, ideally. And so we don't try to overwhelm ourselves with like taking on 5, 6 projects at a time. We really try to stick to 2 or 3. 3 is like the absolute max. And so just because of that, like that's like the fourth function. We have to say no a lot, which sometimes can be really, really heartbreaking because we have so many incredible people reaching out where we're like, we want to do all of the projects, but like we just can't sometimes. So we refer a ton of work out, and that's like a huge, huge, I think, joy that we get is like referring work to people that are a better fit, whether it's like the company's too early stage and they just need a sprint. Like, so we refer a lot of work to people that do more sprint type work for early stage companies, or like they need a much larger agency because they need a ton of hand holding and they need a huge scope of work. And we're just like, hey, we're not the right fit for us. We'll work up to that. So, or, people that are just available sooner than us or a better fit. Like we don't do a ton of, like, we get a lot of inquiries for, not a lot, but like some inquiries for like crypto. It's like, we don't really do crypto brands. We could, but we just like aren't as interested in that. And so we'll refer to people, we know people that are really interested in that industry. So yeah, it kind of works out well.
Yeah. Actually, I have a question about referrals. I just recently, this is very weird, that I just recently discovered that referrals sometimes come with like fees included. Like just it's such a strange thing. I always thought it was like just send some work to your friends, pay it forward, be nice. But I've realized I've left a lot of stuff on the table there, just business wise, as like referrals, as building your business and your network and all of that stuff. So do you have a referral process in place? Do you fit the client with the right person or studio?
We just do the same as you do, where it's like pay it
Oh, yeah.
forward. Like we worked with people that we've actually referred work to people that do have like a referral fee like reward where like they'll give us 10% or $1,000 or whatever it may be if a project lands. And that's always like really, really nice. But we would refer that work to them anyways. Like that's just kind of like a nice bonus. Right. We have actually been on the receiving end though, where people have asked us like, hey, we'll send you this project, but we're going to take a 10 or 20% cut if it lands. And we would be fine with that. But it kind of was a weird way to like, we didn't know this particular person I'm talking about very well, but it was kind of like a weird, I don't know, it gave me a weird feeling a little bit where I was like, I don't know if I really want to be asking people to pay me 10 to 20% of a project lands. Like I understand like why some people do it, but for me, I'm like, I'd rather us just send clients to the right people that need the work at the time, and like everyone's happy in the end, like makes us feel good, makes them feel good, makes the client good, the brand's better. So I don't know, that's kind of how we look at it.
Yeah.
Karma.
I think we're back to the, I was just going to say back to the like manifesting thing. I think we are woo-woo enough that we really do believe that karma, it all just comes back around. And so, I think we're like, I get why people have referral fees. We don't ever plan to have or take referral fees because we just think like if you refer to the right folks, also clients remember you well. And that's like a big piece of it.
Totally. Yeah. It might be a little woo, but not really. I think it's really just kindness and paying it forward. And people remember that in all aspects of how you're kind to folks, whether you're referring someone for a job or sending them work. It'll come back to you.
Totally. Like we've had clients reach out where we couldn't take on the project. We referred it to some other agency. They were really happy with the agency, but then they reached back out to us later for more work or to refer us to another potential client, just because they remembered that interaction. So, works out well.
I'm not against referral fees or anything. I think it's fascinating. cannot believe I just learned that this is a thing. The way that I've done it, like in that networky way, is I have referred people to projects or to speak to other people as like mentors, stuff like that. And I just find like the gratification of just seeing something good come out of it, or like a new friendship, or just like a beautiful little design that came out of the collaboration. It's just like, that's, I don't know. I love that. So I don't know.
No,
But I didn't know if
totally.
there was like some sort of secret referral, like web ring somewhere. One of those web rings from like 1999. That everyone was just
I
like
feel we've totally
circular
referred work to Data
economy.
Lands. You're in our ring.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh my God. Thanks. That's so nice.
Yeah.
Awesome.
No, we actually, I mean, we did just see a project that came out of a referral we sent to another agency because we just couldn't squeeze it in. And it was so fun to see the resulting work because we were like, this was such a good fit.
Yeah.
You all like crushed this project. And then we reached out to that agency. We were like, we should really like hang out. Like, yeah. Which
was
was
that
really,
the Smith and
it was,
Dixon?
Very
Yeah,
cool.
this with addiction.
Yeah,
yeah,
I
we
love
just
it.
talked to a note.
That's where it came from. I was like, because I was Twitter today, or X, sorry.
Always.
I was just thinking, I was like, oh,
It's Twitter.
that's like a nice parallel. I know it is. It's Twitter. It's forever. But I was like, because I know them separately, and then I saw that, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. That I couldn't tell if it was a collaboration or a referral, and then I read deeper into it. But I was like, oh, that's so cool. I love that. That's so, it's heartwarming in a way.
Yeah.
No,
They did such a great job
beautiful.
on that brand. It was so fun to see. Like, and totally different than I think what we would have come up with. So it was just like that's part of the fun too.
Yeah.
it's cool.
Totally.
One more question about the work, and then I'd love to get into life outside of work. 'Cause I know work-life balance is super important. But when you're getting into a project at the beginning of the project, what's your process look like? Where do you find inspiration? And is it the same and repeatable each time, or is it different?
Yeah, good question. It's always it's always different project to project, but the process to figure out where to look for inspiration, I think is kind of always consistent. So we kick our projects off with 2 weeks of discovery, which is really where we're kind of like doing intake and learning as much as we can. That process always for us includes interviews both with the core team and kind of the stakeholders that will be there throughout the project, but then also with the target audience. So folks that we're actually trying to speak to. And usually in those conversations, we'll hear something, or they'll draw a parallel that we wouldn't have expected, or like there'll just be some nugget of goodness in, sort of hidden in those conversations that'll lead us to a rabbit hole. And then that'll really kind of like drive us. So, one of the a good example is we worked recently on an architecture brand, and they said something about nature that reminded me of a poem I had read. And then I was kind of like, oh, I should really look back at Mary Oliver's poetry. And then that became the source of like inspiration for our typography treatment, because the way that she actually kind of typeset her book was really interesting. And so I sent a picture to Jess and was like, check this out. What do you think of this? And so, I think we always kind of try to like listen for those little nuggets in those conversations, because those then lead you down kind of random inspiration rabbit holes that can be really fruitful and interesting.
And then we define like core themes or core brand idea. Like we'll typically list out maybe 8 to 10 themes that we've heard through those conversations or through, sort of that intake process. And those become oftentimes a jumping off point for things like visual treatment, brand motifs, sort of the graphic language that we shape, in addition to the brand story that we end up crafting for them and the brand position. So yeah, it's a lot of like upfront research that inspires that. And then, we always get inspiration from like the traditional places too. We're all like on Pinterest and Norima and brand new and all the places that you go for visual and verbal eye candy. But we try to, as much as possible, look in unexpected places first before we're just like going down the trend rabbit hole of like, what's in right now.
Yeah.
And so
I feel
we'll look
like
in, books,
history
or we'll look
books.
at signage. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. I feel like history is always like a really useful path to go down. That's sort of one of our most reliable, venues for finding inspiration. It's like, okay, let's look at the history of the industry or where their name came from, or, I think there's just a lot of good stories that happened way back when, and we can kind of like pull those into the present, and that's always really interesting.
Nice. How about AI? I know I've seen some tinkering on your end, Jessica, on Twitter with some mid-journey explorations. Have you been leaning into AI at all to help in that ideation phase?
A little bit. And maybe not as much in the ideation phase, but more in like round one presentations. Like, a lot of the companies that we work with are early stage. And so it's like trying to figure out the right brand for them, but also the brand that they can actually implement from like a cost perspective and like resource perspective. And so like in round one, we'll show typically 2 to 4 options of a brand direction, and we'll lay out the pros and cons of each one. And some of those are like, hey, you're going to need to hire an illustrator or a photographer to implement this work, and that's going to cost around X, Y, Z. Or we could go down this direction, which maybe we could use AI. There are pros and cons to that. There's a lot of value conversations that are had around AI with companies right now. We have some sort of guiding principles that we use around AI. Like, I will never input an artist's name if I'm generating art, like using Midjourney, but I still think it pulls from artists regardless. So it's like, it's trying to find a balance there when it comes to like what we feel good about. Sometimes we'll just show it as like round one proof of concept, like, hey, here's stuff we generated with AI, but we recommend hiring this illustrator for this work. And typically that's what the clients that we work with end up feeling good about, or they go in a direction that doesn't require sort of that image generation. But I forget AI as a tool. Like, I think it's a cool tool, but it's not going to hopefully replace us anytime soon.
I don't think it will. I don't know. I'm hopeful about it. I agree. I see it as a tool too.
Yeah. I mean, I use it in the same sort of way, like coming up with references that I see in my head that I cannot find. So it's like a rabbit hole that I get to go down and explore and find the thing that I'm trying to make that would take me like 3 months to make, but I need to show it in a presentation within that week. So
Totally.
It's like you can't, and even like, it's not even about like sourcing art at that point. It's more of like just the reference of there's something that I'd like the client to, to move towards, but I've never seen it before. So how do I get that onto paper? I mean, normally what we used to do is we would sketch things. I would sketch them, and then I'd have a 10-minute long lecture on what I sketched, and then it would, probably not go as well as I would want it to. But, I don't know. I think AI it's an interesting tool if you let it be a tool. I like to think about it. I took a class designing with AI. I did.
Oh, Mia?
Yeah, with Mia. Yeah, just an intro course. And I just liked something that she said, that it's like working with an intern. They can help you pull ideas out of your brain, I guess, and like your notes and stuff, but it's never going to do the work for you. Like, you have to lead it. You have to help it do the work. So I don't know. I think it's if you treat it right, it will treat you right.
Yeah. We call it an intern all the time. Like, it totally is like working with an intern, and like you have to guide them. You kind of have to know where you want to take the work ultimately. And you can help guide it there. And sometimes it's a great intern and sometimes it needs a lot more hand holding. And sometimes it comes up with like unexpected things where you're like, oh, cool. I wouldn't have actually necessarily created that solo. Yeah. I feel excited about AI generated imagery, like if it's manipulated further. Like I think that's where I start to feel excited about using it in like final production work. If we sort of generate an AI image, but then manipulate it quite, like take it into Photoshop or take it into somewhere else and like really manipulate it or layer it or whatever it may be to make it ownable and not just something that was like generated right out of Midjourney, straight to the page. So yeah, it's fun.
I agree. AI tools aside from Midjourney that you've been tinkering with?
Visual Electric, I like quite a bit. I think the quality of their output is much more artistic, but the control, at least I was playing around with it a couple weeks ago, the control level of it isn't quite as on par with Midjourney yet. Like if you want it to venture away from like their preset sort of filter styles that they have, it's kind of hard to push it away from that. So I think like I still find myself gravitating towards Midjourney a little bit more, unless I know I want one of the like the Visual Electric sort of like preset filter styles. What else? We saw like
I struggle on
the
Yeah, we did see a branding one, but we don't use it.
No, we don't need to say.
But it is interesting to know that it's out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I struggle on the verbal side to find tools that are really that useful at this stage. I think, Chat GPT can be useful during like the ideation phase. I haven't really found a ton of success getting it to go where I want it to go in terms of actual like executional output. But I think what's been useful like during the process for me has been sort of during the ideation phase of, being like we were working on a naming project, or we are currently working on a naming project right now, where I asked it like, what are the 10 defining qualities that make us humans? And that was kind of an interesting like output, because then I could kind of use those as jumping off points. But as far as saying like, name this company for me, we see big gaps.
It's not good at humor. That it's not good at the real like niche types of like custom thinking that creatives, either verbal or otherwise, need to be doing. Which is good,
like time saving. Time saving wise, I mean like Reloom, is that Reloom? It's like the wireframe creating one. Like we used on a project recently and I was like, wow, this created wireframes almost like exactly how I would have created wireframes, but like in 20 minutes instead of like half a day or a day. I mean, we still had to tweak it quite a bit, but it was like an incredible starting point and such a huge time save. So like that was helpful, but like it wasn't generating, obviously final design or content, but it was a great start.
I think it's like that. There is the level of you can have something come out of the AI, but you still have to tweak it. You still have to work on it. You still have to know the context about what is it, what do you need it to do, and then how do you fix it so that it's presentable in your specific way, like a way that makes it make sense. And I think that's where there's a disconnect of the naysayers don't like it because they think it's when a professional is using it, they're just taking stuff and then throwing it on like a LinkedIn or as like filler content. I love to just use it, like sprinkle some stuff into like more of the menial tasks that I don't feel like I don't want to write like a paragraph about for a case study or something. I'd like an AI to write that for me because I don't want to. But I want to organize the visuals and I want to art direct them. But it's different levels of usage and being comfortable with them as tools. I think
Yeah.
people probably used to think that Photoshop was cheating.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Like-
a different tool at the end of the
Yeah.
day. I think it's going to help, and it already is helping creatives get past that initial like blank page, not fear of blank page, but it'll help you accelerate to that like initial 25-30% that otherwise is really hard to get going and time consuming.
Totally. And it's
Yeah,
fun to
for
see
sure.
all the AI tools that are coming out. Like we just came across a song generated one. I think this was for
Mhm.
Valentine's Day. They did it.
Valentine's Day.
Yeah, it was like write a love
Fun.
song, and like you could just type in like, write a love song about Goodside Brand Studio, and it would like pop out like
Oh,
That's cute.
an actual love song. I forgot the name. Do you remember the name, Danielle? Like we were having like way too much fun with that for
I
like
don't.
a day.
It was
but
so funny.
it was really funny.
That's
So
awesome.
I mean, I think we're enjoying just like seeing all the creativity, because a lot of creativity is actually coming out of like these AI tools too, like and just like how people are actually using AI.
totally.
So it's cool.
It's a fun time to be a creative.
Mhm.
I think so.
I guess that's a good segue into the future. Have you thought about or envisioned what your careers might look like in the next couple of decades? Does AI play a role in there? Like, how do you envision the design and creative industries evolving?
Yeah. I mean, I do think that more and more tools are going to come out to make our lives easier and allow us both to focus on what we're most excited about, which is brand building. Like that's what we care the most about. And like the way that the brand is built, I think is always going to evolve. And our level of involvement is always going to evolve. I think, especially as we get further along in our careers, like, well, we've discussed being more on the brand advisor side of the spectrum versus like doing all the hands-on work. That's probably a few years out because we still really like being hands-on, but we are going to start to explore a little bit more of that with existing clients sort of staying on as like an brand advisor level. I like always want to be doing brand building in some form or fashion, but I will also say that I kind of want to semi-retire at some point, so like maybe slightly early, and so I think it's probably like we're just going to get more selective about the type of projects that we take on, like only say yes to things that we're really, really excited about and really believe in, which we do anyways, but like probably even more so as we get further along in our career.
Yeah. I don't think I mean, I think what's nice is Jess and I are kind of intentionally building a really sustainable business for ourselves. And so hopefully 10 to 15 years from now, things don't look too radically different at like a high level. We still really want to be doing branding for purpose-driven companies. We, love working directly with founders, and we still want to be collaborating with like as many cool and interesting other collaborators as we can, bringing on like animators and web designers and developers and friends of the studio. Like we really get a lot of joy from that. And so I think like those kind of big picture pillars hopefully shouldn't change even as AI tools come into the picture and the sort of design industry changes around us. I think we're hopefully going to be looking familiar 10 to 15 years from now.
That's great. You can manifest it. Put it in your next dream race.
Exactly.
Okay, tonight everyone has to make a new vision board and
For
I
sure.
love it.
homework. I'm
It's so
going
fun.
to.
Do it.
No, I actually am going to. I'm not joking.
I love that.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, since we have spent some time now speaking to you, we're so excited about everything that you both do and are doing in the design space. And I don't know, I'm speaking for myself, but I think for everybody, I'm so grateful that you're sharing your journey publicly on Twitter and just giving inspiration to everyone. Just trying to make it happen. But yeah, I just want to thank you for sharing your everything on Twitter.
Yeah.
It's very helpful. It's nice.
Well, that's so
Good to
good to
see.
hear. That's kind of like been an unexpected joy of ours, like sharing so publicly. We've gotten just like a lot of good, like we met a lot of good people through Twitter and like sharing our process, and a lot of people reach out like saying that we inspired them to go freelance or to start their own studio or like whatever it may be, and like that's just been really fulfilling to us, and so we're going to keep doing that for forever, probably. Maybe not on Twitter always, but everywhere around the world.
We'll see.
On the interwebs.
Sometime.
I know we have 30 seconds left, but any tips or advice for folks looking to be more active on social and getting themselves out there and promoting themselves?
The more you do it, the less scary it is. Like the more you do it, the less a tweet is precious feeling. You're probably going to look back at some tweets and feel embarrassed about something that you tweeted a year ago. Like I know I have, but whatever. Like just share your work, share your thoughts, share what you would think you would want to read. We kind of have like
Be
guiding
helpful.
principles. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, be helpful.
Yeah. I think be helpful is a good one, just because like self promotion gets old. And I think what people really appreciate on Twitter is just seeing things where you're like, oh, that's how they do it, or like, oh, that's how we got from A to B. I feel like the more helpful you can be, again, that like karmic loop comes back around, and you'll find other folks being helpful and sharing openly. And the more we can all do that, I think the better the energy is.
Yeah,
in
I
the
love
Twitter
that.
sphere.
And you will never see us being mean or criticizing anyone online. Like anytime I see that. But like anytime I see it like taking down like work that a creative has done, it's just like, you know what? It doesn't like, that's not a good
It's
look.
not a good
like please just don't.
No.
It's always so shocking to me seeing people act that way on social media towards other people. Like still, how is this still happening? It's such a tough world out there. Can we just all be kind and help each other and not be trolls on the internet or in real life?
Totally.
Yeah, it's very stressful to also read that stuff. I feel I cringe every time I see someone saying something mean about a design. I'm like, that took probably a really long time to make that tiny bit of design. It probably took 35 people and countless approvals, and that designer's soul was crushed by the end of it. And then you're trying to be mean to them.
Yeah, it goes back to what goes around comes around, and I'm sure the trolls in the world will see their day and be trolled right back at some point.
Totally.
So,
absolutely.
thank you both so much again. It was so lovely having you on and learning more about you and your impressive careers and everything you're doing at Goodside. We can't wait to keep following along your journey and keep learning from you. So thank you so much again.
Thank you for having us. This was so lovely.